Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to this morning's short webinar focusing in on your IT security posture. And as a supported Kick client, understanding better the KickSecure report that you should receive monthly from us. My name is Ian Davis. I'll host this session with my colleague Stuart Beattie, who alongside David Payne heads up our KickSecure division. So in terms of this morning's format, we're taking a slightly different approach in that we're not going to present to you per se, but we're going to run a kind of fireside chat where I'm going to pose questions to Stuart, the common questions that we get from our clients in receiving these reports, hopefully just to give you a bit more insight into the reports and really what they're identifying for you. That said, I would encourage you to use the platform, so use the go-to platform. There is a question section in there. I'll try and moderate that where possible as we go. So please feel free to ask any pertinent questions that you have, either on your own score or just on the kind of wider security posture. The session's been recorded as well, so as a follow-up to this, we will send a copy out just for your reference afterwards. In terms of kind of scene setting, so Kick as a business, we decided to create a separate division altogether from your kind of traditional technical consultancy team that you'll no doubt have engaged with over the years, really with a focus just on all things cyber. So to have dedicated resource, a dedicated skill set within that team. So we are heading towards, dare I say, our 2-year birthday, a kind of 2-year anniversary of that division being in place. And it's fair to say that we've learned a lot over those kind of short 2 years. Cyber as a whole continues to evolve. The threat landscape is certainly very different to what it once was. And kind of dare I say the bad guys are getting more and more astute by way of kind of vulnerability and then trying to breach them. Mainstream news, it keeps it in a sharp focus for us as well. Marks and Spencers and likes of Co-op being very, very good examples of kind of mainstream press. What we would always say though, and hopefully we'll tease out today, that as a team, we can't stress enough that the kind of business, charities, the non-profit sector, regardless of shape and size, everyone's susceptible to the same vulnerability. The attempted attacks, they certainly do not differentiate by way of kind of size and stature. So you absolutely do not need to be a Marks and Spencer to be concerned about the same vulnerability or same attacks that are going on out there. So enough of that kind of preamble. I would say good morning to Stuart. And morning, Stuart. So in terms of kind of just kicking off and a kind of understanding of the score that the clients receive, could you maybe just explain in simple terms, how is that KickSecure score calculated? What is it made up from?
Okay, so it's probably good just to give an idea of
Stuart, possibly.
Okay, and let me just check that. Can you hear me now? Nope. Hear me okay, Ian? Cool. People are hearing me.
I can't hear you, Stuart. You just need to give me a thumbs up if you want the next question.
Everybody's okay. So so the KickSecure score, when we started looking at how we could give our customers a better understanding of their security posture and how their security was, what level their security was at for their organization, we looked at what was available in the marketplace. And of course, Microsoft Secure Score was one of the kind of main areas we looked at. But problems with that, where the Microsoft Secure Score is basically targeted more towards Microsoft products, and it doesn't really take a more holistic approach. So we looked out again and we realized there was quite a lot of inbuilt within the organization. We heard a lot of information about things that were best practice and things to do. So we combined that along with the CIS benchmarks, and we came up with a list of about 100 metrics. And we took those metrics and we tried to adjust a scoring mechanism to them. So we knew that some were much more important than others. So we scored them all together. We gave it a kind of maximum score. Now that varies depending on which configuration you have and which customers you have, which software you have in place. But generally there'll be 100 metrics we mark you out of, and that gives you a percentage score, which we then send out to you. So that means that you get an idea of what your baseline is and whether you're improving or going down or staying still on your battle against security. Hopefully Ian can hear me now. Ready for the next question?
Does anyone know of a good IT company? Because I can't hear you, Stuart. I'm assuming the audience can, so I might just need to tap dance and use a good old thumbs up. So
I'm getting
if you look at trends and risks, Stuart, then I suppose based on these reports, and if you look across the customer base, is there any kind of trends or reoccurring risks that you notice certainly of late, or maybe going back to those 2 years from what you've seen in the early days to what we see now? What are those reports telling us?
So there's a few things we see. So obviously we get the reports for everyone, and we can start to look through and what are the kind of biggest areas that people are lacking out on their scores. And there's a couple of things we see. So the first thing is generally multi-factor authentication. So MFA or multi-factor authentication is available through all the Office 365 platforms for free for all users. So it's really a kind of no-brainer that you should be turning that on to help protect your systems. So just for multi-factor, so you know how that works, basically rather than just using a username and password to log in, it means that you're then prompted again for an additional code that only you will have. So it's really something that's on your local device, for example, on your phone or your local machine. And it means it's much more secure. So if your password's lost, for example, you use the same password on multiple services, it means that there's an extra step that people or the hackers have to go through before they get access to your systems and your organization's data. What we also find though is that MFA is not just for Office 365. We can also use that on other places, and especially we're seeing a lot of attacks on virtual private networks or VPNs to allow you to remotely access your network, or on things like Citrix servers or remote desktop sessions. So again, having VPN access or having MFA on all those systems, again, is a really important point to help protect your network. The other area where we see issues is just around housekeeping. So for example, user accounts, there might be users who've left the organization, there might be temporary accounts being created maybe for auditors or for training purposes. There could be accounts that have been created for new employees, and then the employee hasn't started. And quite often we find that these accounts are sitting there unused. They're a huge problem. They might have a default password that everybody knows, or a simple password that's easy for hackers to get into. They won't have MFA set up on them because nobody's ever used them. So again, really important that you contact us and tell us to help you lock those accounts down to make sure that there's less surface area for you to be attacked.
Thanks, Stuart. I'm back in the game.
You can hear me, kids?
I can hear you now. Thank you. Are there any surprising insights, Stuart, would you say? So certainly over the past few months, is there things that are a surprise, or dare I say things that businesses might often overlook?
Yeah, so I mean, there's some interesting things we've seen, again, just from looking through the reports. An unusual one we've discovered is people setting up automatic forwarding rules. So someone might, for example, want to automatically forward a mail to their Gmail account or to their Outlook account or something else. And that's set up, the user then disappears off, so they maybe go on holiday or they leave the organization, and these emails are still being forwarded out of the organization for them. So it means, for example, there might be somebody who's in the finance or HR department, they're part of an email group. Even though their accounts may have been shared to a shared mailbox or disabled, that mail forwarding is still working. So something to look out for, because it's a way that information starts to leak out of the organization. But probably the biggest thing we have is that all the attacks we see are generally down to one of the users doing something that we really wish that they wouldn't have done. And it's down to the fact that they're not made aware, they don't get training around what is good to do and what is the things they should avoid. So security training, security awareness training. So we talked earlier on about the M&S breach. So that actually, we managed to track that down, or they've tracked that down to a social engineering attack, where someone impersonated to be an M&S employee, contacted another employee, convinced them they needed to reset the passwords, and that was the way that they managed to get into the organisation. The co-op breach as well, which brought the whole of the co-op network down for months, also attributed to a phishing email, which happened the same way that they used that then to steal the user credentials. So in Kick, we offer some training around a thing called KnowBe4. I'm sure Ian will talk to you about but some sort of user security awareness training just to keep things fresh in their memory as to what they shouldn't be doing, and just make it more obvious to them that if something's a hack or something's a phishing attempt, that they pick it up more easily.
Thank you, Stuart. So if we look at improving the score then, so if a business wants to improve that score, is there any kind of quick wins? Would you say there's a kind of top 1, 2, 3 actions that people should hone in on?
Yeah, there are some things that you can really do which will help improve. And it's not just the score, so we're really talking about improving the security that you have there as well. So hopefully you've all looked at your secure score that's came through. So you get your monthly email that links into a web page. So hopefully you realise there's a link there and you can go and look at the web page anytime that you want. So I'll just bring that up on the screen just now. But for every customer, we've built in a top 3 of the main things that we think you should look at to help improve your score. So you'll see on every screen there's a top 3 recommendations. Hopefully you all can see that there. So this is just a demo company we've got. So here it's saying that you can gain some points by using multi-factor authentication. You can get 20 points by using an online backup and 10 points for turning branding on in your AD login page. So these will be updated every time that you make any changes. So for example, if you've got online backups, then something else will replace that top 3. The other thing is that obviously, I could give you some of the main things: multi-factor authentication, user management are kind of one of the top ones, but it's different for every company. So again, and have a look at your score. The other thing to point out is if you click in any of the sections, it will give you a list of all the different individual metrics that are there. And these are all scored or sorted, so the most important ones, or the ones which will give you the biggest boost, are at the top. So if you look, for example, in email, in this particular instance, we've got DMARC records should be published, which will give you 15 points. So that means that you'll get the biggest scores there. So we've got 6 sections at the moment. Look at the 6 sections, figure out which ones are the biggest ones that will give you a gain, and then those are the ones you can work on.
Thanks, Stuart. Just how long does it typically take to see a measurable improvement? So you're highlighting some key areas there. Dare I say quick wins? How long does it take to see a kind of measurable improvement in your scoring?
So the scoring that we do, we've got about 100 metrics. Probably about 85 of those we score on a daily basis. So if you make any changes to your network, leave it for a few days and you hopefully see that your score will start to nudge up and you'll see the impact that that's having. Some of the other metrics take longer to score. We can't automate them, so we have to do it manually. So we've got the team here who will go through, and it can be as long as 2 weeks until the score improves. But bear in mind that as soon as you make the change, although the score might take a minute or 2 or a few days until it gets better, you've actually improved your security. So the chances of you being hacked have reduced from the time that you make that change. So it's really worthwhile going through and doing that as quickly as you can.
And I suppose that leads into quick wins versus longer term strategies, Stuart. So again, we often hear from clients that whether they should focus on quick wins or, dare I say, invest in kind of longer term improvements. What would your advice be in trying to find the right balance, if there is such a thing?
Well, this one's a bit of a Sophie's choice as to whether you go for the quick big bang to get something fixed quickly, or whether you just go for a longer term investment. And the honest answer is that you really need to look at both. So anything at all that you do will help improve your score, which will then mean that you've got a more secure system and less hackable, and there's less chance that people will be able to come in and steal information or cause your damage to the company. Why you want to do that is up to you. Our recommendation, though, was that you want to look at some of the really high-risk items first and try and fix them urgently. So your multi-factor authentication, maybe looking at security training for your users, online backups, those types of things, which you can fix quite quickly, quite easily, without a huge amount of cost. Get them out of the way, which means that then you give you a boost in your score. But you can't just rest on your laurels. You've got to make sure that you continually look and work on improving the score along the way and improving your security. So use the score or use the report that you get to look through and identify other things that you can plan and then look to improve over the rest of the year or the rest of the month. The other thing is that at the moment we've got about 100 different metrics. Security doesn't always stop, so we'll be introducing new metrics in there, and we've got a new release which will be coming up in the next couple of months. So there'll be additional things that you need to check. So it's not a fix it and then you leave it. it's a fix it, but then you have to continually look at what's happening. So long-term strategy is really important. And you need to adapt that long-term strategy so that as the security issues move and change and as new vulnerabilities come out and new ways of looking at things, that you can then adjust your strategy and keep running through. And you might find again that there might be some other high-risk things come into focus or you become available. So again, you might have to do another kind of quick fixes to bring those back up again. But it's a good mix of quick wins to get the initial score up, but then a longer term strategy is absolutely critical to making sure that you stay safe in the modern world.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of what I'd call maybe levelling up then, Stuart, so we've got a KickSecure standard. Can you maybe talk us through just KickSecure Premium, how that works in practice, and I suppose what extra protection does that give clients?
Sure. So the KickSecure standard is really just the reporting. So we do the analysis to look at your network and your configuration and give you a score of how good or bad your current configuration, your current network is. We realise that that's fine, and a lot of companies will look at that score and then they'll have maybe in-house IT, and they can go off and they can try and make some fixes or do some improvements to get things back up again. But a lot of companies don't have that option. And with Kick, we do a lot with the SME market where we are the IT company. So what we want to do is we wanted to offer a service where we can go in, we can do the additional work to upgrade and to fix those issues. So what we do with KickSecure Premium is that we'll then go through and we'll try and fix a lot of the issues that you have or a lot of these things which are happening. Now, we don't fix absolutely everything that's in your KickSecure report. Some things are either optional or need additional investment. So, for example, it might require additional licensing before we can do that. But anything we can do within your current licensing will help you to implement those changes. And we also do some additional things on top of that. So as part of the service, we'll automatically monitor your audit logs. So there's a lot of logs inside Office 365 and other areas that probably people don't look at on a regular basis. So we'll do that for you. It means we can pick up any kind of signs or any kind of hints of any attacks that might be underway. Quite often, for example, a cyber attack won't happen just in one short burst. It'll happen with an initial attack where we can track through somebody making a quick change, but the actual main attack won't happen until a couple of weeks later. So our auditing system, part of the premium, means we can pick up on that. We also look at some other things. We've looked at what the main areas that a lot of people, a lot of companies need to have to improve their security, and we've bundled that into the premium. So with that, you get email outbound security, where we can update your email configuration so that it makes it more difficult for other people to pretend to send email from your company's domain names. We look at vulnerability scanning on your desktops and your servers. So then we can look and see, is there any potential software that maybe isn't covered under the Kick patching routines that could cause issues. So that could be things like Adobe software, AutoCAD are common ones we often see, but sometimes development tools or third-party applications you have that's maybe part of an external agreement, we might find that there's vulnerabilities, and someone could actually use that as the first step to hack into your organization. So again, we give you visibility so then you know what you need to do to try and fix that. And the final area we do is we look at things like dark web scanning. So if, for example, if a username and password has been lost in the dark web, we'll give you the heads up so that your users can then go to in and change that before they get hacked through. So that's all packaged up into the KickSecure Premium, which we offer as a kind of add-on.
Okay, thanks. And again, just in terms of levelling up and different levels of protection, I suppose for any businesses considering a managed SOC, so kind of security operations centre, what's the main value it adds alongside KickSecure Premium?
So the SOC is a 24/7, 365 monitoring system. So it looks at logs and information that's pulled from your devices, from Office 365, from your antivirus, from your servers, from your firewalls, and it all goes into a melting pot. And they look for patterns and actions that are happening there, which then means that they can jump on that. And if something starts to happen, they can shut it down and stop it. Now, where that can be slightly different, where that's different from the premium services, the premiums are more about looking at your configuration and trying to shut things down so that you're in a good, solid, stable state that's good for trying to stop any attacks from happening. But we all know it just takes one error or one very clever person to manage to break down through those barriers. And no matter how well you prepare things with the premium service, someone will eventually get through, and that's where SOC comes in. So the SOC is more like your security guard who's like there continually monitoring and looking at your organization. As soon as something happens, something unexpected that we didn't know was going to happen, or maybe a user action that they've done something, for example, they've automatically logged in and let somebody through, the SOC can then jump in that and then shut things down. And they do that in a couple of different ways. So they've got automated actions. So if something, for example, a process starts off like a ransomware attack on a machine, they can pick up on that and they can just kill off that ransomware software on the machine. They can then take that machine off the network so that it doesn't have the option of then talking to any other machine, so it can break out. And the kind of things that they can pick up on, so it might be, for example, they can pick up on users who've been granted elevated actions. So, for example, Office 365 admin roles, changes to that might be a suspicious feature. They can look at, for example, logins from unexpected locations. So maybe somebody's trying to log in from Africa or East Asia that doesn't look like a normal usage pattern. Could be an unfamiliar sign-in. They're signing in from an unusual time or something that doesn't make sense. Could be a new application has been installed that maybe looks a bit suspicious. And any of those combinations get picked up by the SOC through both automated techniques, but also by people who are actually looking and monitoring this 24/7. And they'll flag up the alert and then let us know, and then we can then help you to shut that down before it becomes an issue. So SOC and Premium work in tandem and in combination with each, and they're both important. I suppose the next question that Ian would probably ask me is which one's the most important, or should we have both? Ideal world, you have both.
That was my next question, sure.
Either or is always better than nothing.
Okay, just so looking ahead then, Stuart, and I suppose I'm kind of heading towards maybe the last questions I have. I see there's a couple coming in on the chat. So again, I've just encouraged anyone to use the kind of Q&A section for stuff, and we'll pick up on them in a minute. But with that cyber threat landscape, it's ever evolving, as I mentioned at the start. What new risks do you see on the horizon? Are you able to stargaze of what's coming?
Well, I wish I was able to see everything that's coming up, but there's some patterns that we can generally see that are starting to happen. A big thing just now is a thing called a man-in-the-middle attack. So the man-in-the-middle attack, it basically gets around the multi-factor, or tries to get around the multi-factor authentication I spoke about earlier on. And you might have seen things like that. So, for example, if you imagine there's a scenario where someone is trying to log into your Office 365 account, they know your username and password because they've got that off a breach somewhere. And as soon as you try and log in with username and password, it then pops up with, please provide your 6-digit MFA code. So what they then do is they go back and they contact you using some sort of social engineering. So they might, for example, send you a message saying, we're trying to access your systems, to prove you who you are. We'll send you a 6-digit code. Can you tell me what that 6-digit code is? You get the code through from Office 365. You think it ties up. You give it to them in the middle, and then he logs in. Once he's logged in, he's in. That's the kind of old-fashioned way of doing that. But there's a lot of services now who are setting up websites that basically streamlines that whole thing, and it means that people who are not very careful and they might not see a website that looks very similar to an Office 365 login page, they might try and log into that, give their MFA code or user authenticator app, and then they bypass the whole multi-factor authentication. So again, we've got fixes in place for that. There's things called phish-resistant MFA and passwordless logins, which again we can configure for you. Some of them need additional licensing, but it's something we can look at and help lock down those additional threats. Some of the other things, with all the cyber attacks now and the whole prevalence of AI, all these kind of bad guys are starting to realise that they can actually get AI to do a lot of this attacks for them as well. So you start to see that a lot of the phishing attempts are becoming much better. So they're using AI to personalise emails that come in. So rather than get a kind of generic email that you might be able to spot because it doesn't look quite right and the language doesn't feel quite right, that's all gone now because AI can make it seem very much like the original source and very personal to you. And it can start to pull in database sources. So, for example, it might know that someone's off on holiday, so it'll pick that up. It's very targeted, very specific cyber attacks that are coming in, especially around phishing. So that's something else we're seeing, again, which pushes off that it's really important to make sure that your users are trained in how to try and spot these things. We're also starting to see the theft of data and the fact that users have been accidentally sending information out of organisations. It comes on to things like automatically tagging of data and trying to stop that from leaving the organisation with information security policies. So again, we've got things like DLP policies and Microsoft have got a lot of technology around that as well, which can help tie your network down so that users don't accidentally leak information out from your network.
Okay, thanks again, Stuart. So we're kind of at the half-hour point, and we're going to ask the $1,000,000 question probably right at the end. If you had one piece of advice to help businesses stay ahead, what would that be?
One piece of advice. So obviously the first thing you have to do, the one piece of advice, would get a good IT company like Kick to try and support you, because we're there and we can look after you. Probably though, the one thing I look at is try and look inwards at your own networks. It's not just always attacks are coming from outside the organisation. Quite often the attacks can come from what seems to be inside your network. And that doesn't just mean your own employees and your own organisation. It could be the organisations that you deal with. So a lot of the things we're starting to see now is around the supply chain and looking at the organisations that you deal with. So we look at companies like, for example, M&S, who had the huge breach. That turned out it was probably coming from one of the organisations that they outsourced a lot of their business to from their IT support. Also happened with a few of the NHS attacks that came in earlier this year, where the actual issue wasn't so much with their own IT systems, it was with a trusted supplier. So we're literally looking at what's in your internal networks and starting to look at the people you deal with on a regular basis. So for example, if you deal with a third-party supplier, they get hacked, first thing they're going to do when they get hacked is to send you an email inbound, and you'll get an email from what you think is a trusted supplier. You'll trust that. So for example, you make an email from their HR department or from the finance department saying, can you change these banking details and send us a payment? From your side, everything looks as if it checks out, but they've been hacked, so it's really down to their fault. So again, don't just look at your own IT systems, also try and look at what's happening elsewhere, because there could be issues that are outside your control that are then kind of causing you issues and causing you inconvenience and potentially a loss of money and damage to your business and your brand.
Perfect. Thank you, Stuart. That's all the questions there I had, or certainly be prepared for. But thankfully, we've got a few that's been posted in the chat. So with just under 15 minutes left, we should have enough time to cover them off in the call. So I'll go with the first one, which is first one that's came in. Someone's asking in relation to people leaving. When we tell the support team someone is leaving, is there a standard checklist that could be used so we don't miss things like mail forwarding and requesting what should be cancelled or not be checked, and perhaps other things we might not think or remember to ask when going through the leavers process?
So we're trying to do some work internally just to make sure that it's easier for you when you tell us that something's gone wrong. One of the issues we have is that different companies have got different requirements for how things work. So for example, when a user leaves, ideally we want to disable their account and take any licenses off them. But for example, it might be that you want to put that into a kind of almost suspended animation. You may want to make it a shared mailbox so that people can still access the data until you're used to that. So we're going to be looking at doing some sort of kind of details around how to highlight that. But one of the main things you can do is look at your KickSecure report, because any user who hasn't been around for 90 days or has a particular security issue, it will get picked up in that report, and then you can then contact the service desk and say, look, can you shut this down because it has been done exactly the way or the most secure way that you want. But generally, the things you want to look at is contact the service desk and ask them if they can disable the account for you. That's the primary thing, so the user can't then log in again. And then maybe set a diary appointment. For example, if you want to make sure that you've got access to their data for the next couple of months, set a diary appointment for a couple of months so that you can then contact the help desk again and say, okay, we've had that couple of months, now can we take that license off and just completely shut down the account? I mean, other than that, service desk will start to be doing things. They're becoming more aware of these, for example, forwarding rules and so on. So they will probably ask you when you're shutting the account down, what you want to do. And we'll try and aim to help you with that. Again, the big thing I say is keep an eye on your KickSecure report, because some of those items that we talked about will start to come up there. If anything's been missed off, it gives you a chance to just go through and shut those down.
Thank you, Stuart. And again, another question that's been posted. So we have ongoing issues with customers' emails that typically come from a personal email account getting caught in security and not getting through to us, as well as customers' emails that were coming through but suddenly were getting blocked, possibly due to an update to firewall. Is there any way to manage this better while still being secure?
This is a really difficult thing to try and overcome, especially if the users are coming from, especially personal email addresses, or we often get this where they're sending emails from smaller companies who haven't got their systems set up just 100% correctly. Generally for things like if they're using a Gmail account or a live account or something like that, then those systems will have the kind of perfect security in place. It's a balancing act. So what we just have to do is look at particular issues that you have, and then we can look at pulling things out or putting things in place. The other thing is that quite often when email systems are set up, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, when it came to inbound email security, quite often we'd have a conversation and we'd say, what do you want us to try and stop? And quite often it would be, we'll just stop everything that looks suspicious, which then means that you have issues with those kind of emails from smaller customers or smaller individuals. So again, it's certainly something we can look at to shut things down. A lot of the kind of anti-spam systems are becoming much more intelligent now as well. So they're better at picking things up. So it might be a case that you maybe want to look at the anti-spam solution that came along a long way and see if there's something new that you wanted to put in place, especially around Office 365 or like some of the mail security systems that we sell here with Kick. So there's always something we can do. Get in contact with your account manager and we can have a look at it to see what improvements we could make on it.
Cheers, Stuart. And so one other one, so how does Windows Hello fare with securing your device or systems versus multi-factor authentication?
Okay, so Windows Hello is really another form of multi-factor authentication. So when we talk about multi-factor authentication, the factors we talk about are different things which identify you individually that allow the system to know who you are. So for the case of, for example, a standard multi-factor authentication with your phone, the two factors are your username and password, and then the second factor is the fact that you've got a phone which generates a code. Or it could be that you've got, for example, it sends you a text message. The text message is your phone number. So the fact that it sends your phone number is the second factor that it knows about. So when we talk about Windows Hello, the second factor then becomes the fact that you've physically got a hold of your laptop, and we've configured that laptop so that it knows about you and it's tied into your security. So Windows Hello is actually a really powerful MFA because of the fact that if you lose your laptop, you know that you've lost it, and you can then contact your IT department or contact Kick Support, and we'll then remove that as one of the multi-factor authentications. But it's a fairly kind of bulky thing to carry around with you. And on top of that, generally to actually log into the system before you can start to use Microsoft Hello, it needs to have, for example, your face or some other biometric that needs to be kind of attached to you. So for example, my laptop, I've got my face which can unlock it, I've got a fingerprint which can unlock it. So again, it's not just a laptop, it's also you as a person who has that kind of second factor. So in this case, when you log in, the multi-factor will be you and the device. And because it actually requires you, it's even more secure than, for example, a text message or a multi-factor authentication code from a phone, because somebody might know the code to your phone and could unlock it. And the phone's a small device, that means that somebody could then walk off with it and get access to your systems without knowing what's going on. And you'll start to see that some of the newer technologies come out around the anti-phishing and the passwordless actually start to use more biometrics and kind of physical devices to actually be in your possession as part of the whole MFA, and it does make it much more secure. So Windows Hello, fantastic technology and very secure.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. And last one that we've had posted, which fits into our timeline. So integrating other software through single sign-on, does this make your system more vulnerable? I.e., if the third-party software was attacked, can this be a breach in?
So depending on what you use for your single source of authentication, if you trust the single source of authentication, for example, Office 365, or there's many other ones out there, then tying your system into that then hopefully means that you're piggybacking on the improved security that that gives you. So, for example, if you used to have a website that you had to log in with a username and password, then tying into Office 365 or Azure AD authentication means that then you get the whole MFA and multi-factor authentication and potential passwordless login. So it just makes it much more secure. Now, there is the option that if you don't have that single source of authentication tied up properly, and you don't have that secured as well as it could be, then there is a question that yes, you could be making your systems less secure because of the fact that someone then can use that as a backdoor to get in. There is also the option that, for example, if you tie it into that and there was a breach with that single system, then you could then open that up so that they can then access to multiple systems at the same time. But it's a risk-based approach. So I tend to think if you look at the risk of that versus the risk of having to maintain multiple logins and multiple MFA accounts for multiple systems, the actual management of that becomes much more complicated and takes more time and more effort. So therefore, you maybe don't put as much effort into it, especially as a small company. So by centralizing into a single MFA, a single authentication scheme, from my opinion, it probably makes it more secure, although that you just have to be aware that there are potential issues around that. So be aware that you need to keep on top of things. And again, we spoke about KickSecure Premium, making sure that you have everything tied down and configured as well as possible is really important to make sure that the kind of centralized login system then doesn't become a single point of failure. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you again, Stuart. Thank you. And again, thanks to the attendees for posting very relevant questions as well. So that's us getting towards the end of the call. So Stuart, first of all, thank you for your insight and answering the questions. But I'd certainly like to thank all the attendees that have attended this morning. Very much appreciate your time. As I mentioned at the start, the recording will be shared with you for your reference. But by way of kind of call to action, if anybody wants to delve that bit deeper, either into just their overall security posture or their KickSecure scoring, please do reach out to your relevant account managers and or come direct to Stuart or myself, and we can direct from there. It's worthy of note, just a few minutes, you will be getting a lot more press with our annual Kick Showcase event, which this year is on the 23rd of September. And in line with today's session, you can book a kind of one-to-one session with the likes of Stuart and David to go over your KickSecure report on an individual basis. So please look out for the press and the invites for that on the 23rd of September. And if no one has any more questions, we are a few minutes ahead of time, and I'll look to close the call down in 10 seconds. So I thank you again for your attendance and hope to catch up with everyone soon. Cheers again. Thank you, Stuart.